Starfox 64 is one of my top 10 favourite games, known for its branching paths, rumbleback implementation, and most importantly, its mass amounts of voice acting for a game on a cartridge. Now, most people are well aware of the Japanese and English voices, and some go as far as compare the two. But very few go even further and compare with the third language. Now, most of you are probably thinking, what third language? Are you referring to Lilac, exclusive to Europeans? No, I'm actually referring to Mandarin Chinese. For those who don't know, there was a Nintendo console exclusively in China known as the iQue player, or Shenyouji. Originally, there was a ban implemented on home consoles in 2000, and Nintendo's strategy to market games in China was to show how video games can help improve children's mental and social development. Released in November of 2003, the console's library consisted of 14 Nintendo 64 games. Starfox 64 was one of them, known as 星际火火. However, what shocks people is the insane amount of localization that went into these games. Apart from voice acting, even certain textures were changed. Not even the Japanese versions went this far. In this video, I'm going to be comparing all three languages of every speaking character in the game and just pick my favorites. But first, we need to at least acknowledge some of the different culture and language differences. English uses the word order of subject, verb, object, SVO, I open box. The same goes for Chinese, but Japanese uses the word order of subject, object, verb, SOV, I box open. If any of you have heard Chinese before and it sounded kind of like up and down and up again in like tones, that's because Chinese is a tonal language. So there's a difference between saying ba, ba, ba and ba. Next, they don't literally share the exact same sentences, but you might hear some similarities between English and Chinese. And finally, for now, vocal directions will be different in other countries. While English will sound more comical and light-hearted, Japanese will sound a lot more serious at times. I'll go more into the languages as the video progresses. For deciding my favourite voices, let's use a Venn diagram. Yeah, didn't think I'd see these again after education. Let's start with Fox McCloud.
I'll do my best. Andross won't have his way with me.
I think age was important to imply here. He had to sound young. He sounds the youngest in Japanese to me. With a young age comes the likelihood of using either informal or slang language, even phrases. English has a little. Let's compare with Japanese here.
I see him up ahead. Let's rock and roll. Let's take out that weapon, boys.
There are ways to informalize other languages, but I'll get to that point in a little while. The Chinese version sounds a bit older.
看我的吧，我不会让安德罗斯得逞的，准备陆战之王。
But it's redeemed with a sense of confidence. Not too much, rather disciplined. He sounds the most like a leader. They all have their own benefits, so I'll stick Fox in the middle. Next we have Falco Lombardi, our man with a bit of attitude.
See my ship? Does it look okay to you?
In English we have the sarcasm.
Gee, I've been saved by Fox. How swell.
The name calling.
Hey Einstein, I'm on your side.
And the occasional remark that has a slight roast to it.
Fox, you're supposed to shoot them all?
Looking at the translations of all languages, English has the most attitude, definitely compared to Japanese.
Cat, can't you go bother someone else?
But what about the Japanese voice? I had to do some research. I've noticed that Falco uses a lot of the ending particle of ze and zo. Ze can be used as playful talk or a vulgar version of another particle yo, which can be used for exclamation. Like zo, it can be used to indicate a force, command, or masculine emphasis on a will or opinion. So you get ikuayo, ikuzo, or ikuze. For any otakus watching, you may hear ze a lot in anime, manga, or other fiction, but apparently in real life, ze is considered old-fashioned, with zo being more common, just in case you genuinely want to learn the language. I've also noticed that Falco uses a specific version of the word I. There's multiple ways of saying I in Japanese. Most people will know watashi, but there's also atashi, boku, and ore, which Falco uses a lot. Ore is a more masculine equivalent. This more masculine and assertive way of talking makes him stand out more as one of the cooler characters. Obviously Falco is a talented pilot, and he'll get serious when the going gets tough in all languages. Japanese Falco is definitely the most serious.
猿と俺たちの違いを見せてやるぜ。次から次へと懲りねえ奴らで。こんなところでくたばるなよ。フォックス、危ない。
The Chinese version is somewhat unique. Falco in other languages doesn't really express more sensitive emotions. He's never scared, and you can rarely hear him sound sad.
This is horrible. I can't believe they did this.
Oh, fuck. I can't believe you've done this.
The Chinese voice lets some emotions go, but it's not a bad thing. He doesn't turn into some whiny pussy if he has an enemy on his tail, nothing like that. His expressions give off more youthful vibes.
Yeah! 有效了！太晚了，你们完了，小子！
He sounds excited here, taking as much life as he can while he's young and adventurous. I like that, it's a bit more expressive. Considering Falco is supposedly only a year older than Fox, I guess it makes sense. It reminds me of Rock Lee from Naruto. Once again, all languages have their own uniqueness. I'll stick him in the middle.
Next, we have Peppy Hair. Let's get the barrel roll out of the way.
Do a barrel roll.
ローリングで弾くんだ。
做侧滚翻。
All of Peppy's voices sounded like they should. Older. According to Wikipedia, as of Starfox 64, he's only 41, but he sounds way older than that to me in all languages.
They all fit into their own country's vocal directions nicely. In English, he's not some strict veteran keeping the rookies in place like he is in later incarnations.
Hey! This is not a vacation! Just look at this mess. Were you boys raised in a barn?
He actually sounds quite friendly.
You're becoming more like your father.
In Japanese, he sounds like a full-on soldier.
すぐに反転しろ。何をしとるフォックス、早く。
The same goes for Chinese as well.
史力比注意你后面，你被跟踪了，我冲过去了，掩护我，火狐。
I'll stick him in the middle. I know we're off to a bit of a boring start, but don't worry, this is where things get interesting.
Up next, Slippy Toad. You know how they get voice actresses to voice boys? It's obvious they did that here for Slippy, especially when the audio is uncompressed. But I think the audio compression helps with sounding boyish. I don't really know how to describe it, but to me it does. And I think this is done best for the English voice.
Thanks, Fox. I thought they had me.
When it comes to getting himself into troublesome situations, as he usually does, he panics the best in Japanese. However, when it comes to sounding like a young boy, the Chinese version did not care one bit about this. Slippy has a China vagina, and I am no longer the same person knowing those last two words rhyme. Also, people say Slippy has an annoying voice, but most of them have probably only heard the English version. Slippy's Chinese voice is just... Just listen to some of these comparisons between English and Chinese.
Whoa! Help me! 哇，救救我 ！Incoming! 来啦 ！No!
I like how the Mandarin negation marker is pronounced bu, negation in grammar being the use of negative words to change the meaning of another word. So in Chinese, 我喜欢 becomes 我不喜欢. I find it funny because as an English speaker, the first boo I think of is the boo of disapproval.
Are you saying boo or boo-earns? I was saying boo-earns.
One could argue that the Chinese voice is more dramatic, but because it blatantly sounds more girly to me, which is not in line with the character, I can't really put it on par with the other voices. To me, his voice is going between English and Japanese.
Let's move to General Pepper. I'm not a fan of his Japanese voice. He seems way too calm and composed for the situation, even at the start when Corneria is getting blown to smithereens. But perhaps compression might be the problem here, I don't know. He's not like that all the time though.
そこは灼熱地獄だ。アウインの期待では心配だ。無茶をするな、フォックス。
But still, he sounds too old to me, and I'm talking on the verge of retirement. He can't project himself, too groggy sounding. Going back to Corneria getting blown to smithereens, I'd be a bit more panicked. That's where the English voice comes in.
We need your help, Starfox. Andross has declared war.
The Chinese version is this battle-hardened veteran.
他已经入侵莱拉特星系了，企图控制整个克尼利亚。
Now that's one hell of a general. Even though Starfox is not part of the Cornerian army, he sounds like he's commanding them like they are. I would put General Pepper between English and Chinese. Next we have Rob 64. Japanese is monotone but slightly high in pitch. He's like your average robot pal in a kid's show. English is monotone, but the pitch is lower.
Message from General Pepper. Priority 1.
Not much to say there, kind of just your ordinary generic robot, really. However, Chinese is different. You can hear the tones.
危险，离爆炸还有1分钟，30秒后自动销毁，15秒后爆炸，炸弹要爆炸了，快离开。
Even though it needs to because Chinese is a tonal language, one can argue here that Chinese Rob has more advanced vocal capabilities. He also has this different robotic filter in his voice compared to the others. I like it. It seems that Chinese and Japanese add a bit more to the character. If I'm going with my own personal preferences, I'm actually going to stick him in Chinese. Corneria's Easy Boss.
Ah, so this is Starfox.
On Wikipedia, he's described as one of Andross's most trusted and faithful lieutenants. This is definitely implied in his voice, showing lots of enthusiasm. He shows great respect for Andross, referring to Andross in Japanese as Andross-sama, an honorific name for those in higher rank, and my emperor when he's defeated in English and Chinese.
My emperor! I failed you!
I think in terms of emotion, English is fine. I just don't think Chinese is as emotional.
我的皇帝，我让你失望了。
Japanese can be a bit too much. It comes off perhaps silly to me. One can argue that because he's the first boss on the easy path, we shouldn't take him seriously, but compared to the rest of the Japanese voices, which we'll get to, he seems out of place, which is why I'll stick him in English. Corneria's hard boss.
Ah, someone wants to play.
He definitely sounds like a bad guy. A heavy sounding guy in all languages. Not fat, I'm talking muscle.
まだ我々に逆らう奴らがいたのか。
啊，有人想陪我玩玩吗？
Seems fine, but one thing that sets them all apart is the last line of defeat when he dies. I don't really like the Japanese version. He sounds already injured, as if he's using his last bit of strength to speak.
そうだったのか。
It doesn't sound as awesome, like we're killing someone who's already vulnerable. It's not as satisfying. In English, he sounds like he's taking all of the pain when shouting Andross.
You'll never defeat Andross!
I swear I've heard that before, when they prolong the duration of the last word or syllable they say when they're about to die or fly away. In Chinese, you don't get anything like that because he's pretty much finished talking as the explosion happens.
你们绝对不可能打败 Andross 的。
I'll stick him in English. Meteo's boss, or the asteroid field's boss. All voices sound intellectual, methodical, and composed.
I cannot allow you to go any further.
ここから先へは通しませんぞ。
我不会让你再向前一步了。
Emotionally, Chinese is a bit lack.
如果连这个也不行的话，
Even when he's about to die, he sounds more shocked than anything.
真难以置信，我竟然输给了这个渣子。
What's interesting in Japanese is that the emotion gradually gets greater as the battle commences.
ではこれならどうです？お見通しか。この攻撃がダメならな。貴様ごときにこの私が。
But I think English is on a different level. I'll explain slowly. What I first noticed was the exclamation in the last word of each sentence after the shield goes.
How about this, huh? You're not as stupid as you look! If this does not work...
It reminds me of when fighters attack, but they project the last word during the attack. You know, something along the lines of, take this and that, like in the cartoons.
Finally, I think he's the most emotional at his death.
I can't believe I lost to this scum!
I'm putting him in English. Also, some trivia for the non-Europeans. His lilac voice is so dumb. Sector Y boss. For those who know already, it's a clear winner, but still, I'll go through them. There are multiple different vocal directions with this character. The English voice sounds more like some intimidating ace pilot.
Don't party just yet. It's time to try our new weapon.
The Japanese version, however, sounds like he's born to kill.
貴様ら、調子に乗るなよ。新型の性能を試すにはちょうどよいわ。
The Chinese version is a bit different. Less on intent to kill and more unstable sounding.
别高兴得太早了，该试试我们的新武器了。
All three are different. At this point, it's all down to the iconic scream. Again, it's a clear winner. Japanese. But I do like the way the other two build up the scream like they're trying to hold it together but failed. Wolf O'Donnell. Chinese wolf. No. Just no.
别太嚣张了，心急火燎。
He just sounds way too crazy to be a leader.
不，我不相信。
Japanese wolf sounds the most threatening.
そうはさせるか、スターフォック
Definitely the voice of a bad guy, intent on killing.
ス。狐ごときが調子に乗るなよ。
But I'm not a fan of his defeat lines. He's holding back his voice like he's injured in his first defeat.
この俺がやられるとは。
In his second defeat, I expected him to be a bit more surprised.
バカな、俺より上なのか。
I know he can project his voice more, but he just doesn't. English Wolf sounds like a sensible leader.
Can't let you do that, Starfox.
His accent sounds half British, half American, like mid-Atlantic.
You're in my sights. You're going down.
The mid-Atlantic accent can imply something of high society, a very wealthy upbringing and highly educated. He sounds like the brains of the team and definitely the right voice for a leader. His defeat lines are great. Vocal projection is used here effectively.
I can't lose. No way. I don't believe it.
I'll stick him in English. Leon Powalski. It's interesting when compared to Falco, as they're both considered rivals.
Andross has ordered us to take you down.
Classy, sophisticated, and competent. The opposite of the more informal and hot-headed Falco. English and Japanese are great at being the opposite of Falco in this regard.
You're not as tough as I thought.
Chinese Leon is average.
Andross 大人命令我们干掉你们。
His voice is still deeper compared to Falco, but Falco's lighter Chinese voice wasn't much of an obstacle to differentiate from anyway.
你没我想象的那么厉害。
I feel like his voice doesn't go deep enough. He ends up just sounding like your average soldier. I'll stick him in English and Japanese. Next we have Pigma Dengar.
Peppy, long time no see.
There are mainly two different personalities here. Let's start with English. A weak bad guy, whether physically or even mentally, can hide behind something powerful in their control so they can feel good about themselves.
Come on, little man. Shoot me.
If they succeed, they'll gloat about it to hide their insecurities, like a proper weasel.
I've got 2 words for you. Loser.
But you can still sense a coward inside the voice. Put them in a vulnerable situation and they'll cry for their mum.
My beautiful reward.
Pigma hides behind his powerful ship to feel confident, but he's really in your face about it. But you can tell he over-relies on it.
You can't beat me. I've got a better ship.
The Japanese voice is a bit different.
親父と同じでお前も甘いやつやの。
The gloating is there, but he sounds heavier, like he has some weight to him. Literal fat. A pig so fat he couldn't fit in the joke I wanted to make. But it does make sense. To call someone a pig is to commonly imply that they're fat or they eat too much. And the Chinese voice is closer to the English persona.
来呀，小家伙，开火呀！
I think it's all down to the memorable quotes he has.
地獄で親父が待ってるぞや。
Daddy screamed real good before he died.
你父亲死前的惨叫可真动听。
They all sound pretty good to me. I'll stick him in the middle. Andrew Oikonny.
Andross's enemy is my enemy.
I think one voice stands out. In Japanese, he sounds like a dedicated soldier, which sounds better when he's talking about his uncle Andross.
落ちろ！アンドロス様のためにも！アンドロおじさん！
He speaks of him as a role model to look up to. To me, he also sounds a bit on the younger side, which I feel suits the character. In English, he sounds like a bit of a punk.
Stick to the pond, Froggy.
The youthfulness in his voice is still there, but the way he speaks of Andross isn't as good as Japanese. He sounds like a follower who worships him rather than a trained pilot willing to fight for his family.
Bow before the great Andross.
In Chinese, it's the opposite. He sounds like a soldier, but he also sounds older.
你们永远都别想碰安德鲁斯一根毫毛。
I think the age is important for the character, and a vocal pitch can help preserve that. I'm sticking him in Japanese. Next, we have Bill Gray. I think one important point to get right is the similarity to Fox. According to lore, they're old friends from military academy. We need to bring back the different vocal directions for Fox and see how Bill compares. In Chinese, Bill shares the same confidence as Fox.
坚持住，援军马上到了。
But there's one thing that sticks out in the Chinese version. When you friendly fire someone in the game, Of course they get angry, but it's not some pure scolding. When uncompressed, you can hear a bit more anger in Bill.
向敌人射击火狐，火狐，那是自己人。
Like Japanese Fox, he sounds very young.
各隊、援軍が来るまでもう答えるんだ。前期に次ぐ。円盤のハッチが開いたぞ。
We know already that the Japanese voices get very serious. Bill's Japanese voice makes him sound very alert and commanding in the situation. A true leader, possibly better than Fox. In the more light-hearted English version, Bill sounds real cool.
Hang on, guys. Help is on the way.
When I first heard him, I thought he sounded way too duty and annoying, but he sounds much better without the N64 compression.
We can catch up later, Fox. Yeehaw! You did it!
I'm putting Bill in the middle. Sector X Boss, the secret weapon. I think there's a clear winner. I'm not a fan of the Japanese voice. For a secret weapon, she doesn't sound intimidating. I get the idea that putting a childlike voice onto something dangerous and out of control can be creepy and all, but it just doesn't work for me. I'm more into lower pitched voices for dangerous bosses, but if you wanted to keep that voice, but still wanted to show a sense of instability or something out of control, you can pitch the tones of words and sentences all randomly. GLaDOS from Portal is a good example.
Most people emerge from suspension terribly undernourished. I want to congratulate you on beating the odds and somehow managing to pack on a few pounds.
The Chinese voice is also around the same vocal pitch, but weirdly enough, she's monotoned.
你是敌人，主人在哪里?
That seems so odd for Chinese. The English voice seemed the most right to me.
Where is the enemy? I must be complete.
Even the Lilac language got this right, and perhaps even better. Since I'm not including Lilac in the Venn diagram, I'm sticking her in English. Up next, Katt Monroe. Honestly, all the voices act the same. All languages share the same tones of seductiveness.
Take the right, light boy. I have the left.
你要独享所有快乐吗？
I know it's there in English, and I've seen enough big-titted, horny Asian women to know it's there in other languages too. I'll stick a smack bang in the middle. Zones Boss. In English, he's a solid-sounding pirate.
Adjust 10 degrees right. Fire!
I've seen enough pirate-related media to know that for sure. Now, with that being said, what on earth does a Japanese or Chinese pirate sound like? The Japanese voice is fine, but I have a lot to talk about here. I'm surprised he doesn't sound heavier. When it comes to being an antagonist leader of any kind, mostly they're depicted as bigger, in height, weight, muscle, or all of the above. A heavier voice can do that. He just sounds a little lighter here, but I don't think that's a bad point. There's a slight grogginess to his voice, as he does look old with that white beard. His death scream has one small detail to note. If you can hear past the compression, you can hear a slight clog of the throat. Now in fiction, when you hear people die, sometimes they make a sound, so it just makes his death sound more gruesome. Now with the Chinese voice, I'm pretty sure I've heard this already.
放肆的小鬼，压力角度正常，发射鱼雷。
Look, I might be culturally ignorant, but doesn't Peppy, General Pepper, and this guy sound the same? The only difference is that he's a bad guy. His death scream sounds similar to the English one, where it has more of the arg sound to it. I'll stick him in English and Japanese. Macbeth Boss. Well, they threw in a southern accent in English.
Here come the little hyenas now.
Don't get me wrong, I like it. I'm glad it's not just all generic American voices from non-specific regions. Even Sector Y's boss has an accent which most people put somewhere on the east coast of the United States, somewhere between New Jersey or Brooklyn. He has this older and rougher sounding voice. I feel like I can envision that voice somewhere specific. He sounds like a proper working class guy, and I mean physically, being in the nastiest work environments and survived, going into the mines for minerals and gems, the digging in the desert for oil sort of guy. So him being on a rickety sounding train in a grey, lifeless, rocky planet, it seems suitable. He has a nice ending scream, but only if you take him out by switching the train tracks. He gets louder the closer he gets to his inevitable demise, crashing into the base.
I can't stop it!
You can hear the panic build up through the sentence. I really like that. Unfortunately, I can't apply the same accent analysis to the other languages because I'm not an expert in Japanese or Chinese accents and dialects. Not much is known about the accents of characters in Japanese. The only thing I found was Pigma supposedly speaks in Kansai dialect. What can I take from the Japanese voice? He definitely sounds like an antagonistic boss. You can tell how enthusiastic he is when attacking him because I noticed some Japanese people roll their R's more than they should for dramatic emphasis. The Japanese boss has a pretty good death scream, but only if you take him out without hitting the switch on the train tracks. I think there was supposed to be another scream when he explodes, but I've heard it's unused. English and Chinese have one, but for some reason it's a whoa instead of an ah, like an actual scream.
Whoa!
The Chinese version is a bit lag.
他们没把我当回事，不好，减速器被击中了，停不下来了。
He sounds like a bad guy, sure, but he's not as emotional as English and Japanese, and his whoa is pretty bad.
Wow!
What was that? That's like when you're trying to act excited over a small petty firework.
Hey look, another one of the big fireworks went off.
Wow!
I'm putting in between English and Japanese. Next, we have Caiman.
Caiman here. No problems.
There's not much to go on, but perhaps I've found an answer. This is going to sound hard to explain considering I'm looking at an old image of a computer-generated animal. He looks young to me. The big eyes make his head small. With that being said, a small voice should accompany him. I think the Chinese version sounds a bit too old.
听到了吗？紧急战备。
English and Japanese sound younger, with Japanese probably the youngest.
Not yet, sir.
This is where I'm going to nitpick. Hear me out. When breaking through the 3 lines of fleet, the enemy would react more shocked or scared the further you broke through the fleet, right? I think English does a better job at implying this.
They've broken through the first line.
They're through the second line! The last line has been breached!
Whereas the Japanese version is kind of the opposite, where the reaction gets less surprised as Starfox fights through. I'll stick him in English. The Area 6 commander.
Did we get him?
Again, not much to go on, and what's worse is that I have less to say.
开火！开火！不能让他们过去！
Fire! Fire! Don't let them through!
I mean, they all sound pretty good to me. So, in the middle, I guess. Now we're up to Andross.
I've been waiting for you, Starfox.
The Japanese laugh and scream are used on all versions. I think the hard ending was more suited to Japanese in terms of audio cues. Unlike the other languages, Japanese Andross blows up on the last syllable. The timing seems perfect. Japanese translation is along the lines of, "There is no escape, you will perish with me." Because we're working with SOV word order, the last word is perish. Screamed, I might add. Awesome. I feel like the timing of audio cues gives Japanese the advantage. The Chinese voice compressed on iQue audio sounds demonic. He sounds the evilest in Chinese for sure. The English voice sounds more like a galactic empire leader, more on the lines of Darth Vader.
You know that I control the galaxy.
Join me, and together we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
Given that invading the Lilac system was his objective, this makes sense. I feel like Japanese is in the middle of demonic and leader here. They all have their own unique pros here. I'll stick him in the middle. Now we're on to James McCloud. There's not much to go on, but I might have a fair answer. Despite deeper voices, English and Japanese sound very soft-spoken and gentle.
Never give up. Trust your instincts.
But it just isn't the same in Chinese, yet not in a bad way.
跟我来，火狐，这边来，火狐。 永远别放弃，相信自己的直觉。
It's the deepest one, yet warm as Mandarin can sound. But I'll say this, if Chinese Leon sounded as deep as Chinese James, I would have put Leon in the middle. But there is one factor for Chinese James that's done even better than English and Japanese. The final line he says in English and Japanese is along the lines of telling Fox that he's gotten stronger. But any elder, mentor, or higher ranking soldier can say that. But the Chinese version goes a bit further, but it's all the more effective.
你长大了，更强壮了，火狐。
The 你长大了 is the new part. To translate that on its own is something along the lines of, you've grown up. Something a parent would definitely say, or someone who was there when Fox was younger. But considering that Fox hasn't seen his dad in years, it's an even more sweeter moment, done better in Chinese in my opinion. And for that alone, James is heading to Chinese. Now you'd assume that would be it for this video, but I have one more voice to go over. You see, the training tanuki known as Yaru De Pon never had a speaking voice in the original version. He originally had some sort of Morse code sounding voice, similar to something you'd hear in the Lilac language. But they finally gave him a voice in the 3DS version. Now that was also released in China, but I don't know if there was any new Chinese voice acting for it. I wonder what he sounds like. He looks like some average cute mascot for something. I assume he'll sound like Tails from the Sonic universe. Let's have a listen and find out. In English first.
Use the circle pad to steer. To ascend, slide the circle pad up. To descend, slide the circle pad down. If you destroy multiple enemies at once, you'll earn bonus points.
Well, not quite what I had in mind, to say the least. As one internet user put it, Jesus Christ, why does he sound so seductive? I mean, I get where he's coming from. He's probably the only pilot who can man an R-wing and fiddle with 2 joysticks at the same time.
Shut up! Press the B button to fire your laser. Hold the B button if you want to charge it.
He isn't just shooting lasers either.
You're making it worse!
Well, what about Japanese?
アーウィンの操縦はスライドパッドで上昇は上に動かし、下降は下に動かします。
Lighter in tone, but nowhere near close to my expectations. I've got nothing else to say really. You guys want me to do it? You want me to put them in English, don't you? Okay, fine. English it is. And there you have it. It's interesting how different countries can take on vocal directions. We can watch something in one language for many years and then get weirded out when you hear it in another language. But that doesn't mean there's no thought going into the other language dubs. And with that being said, I'm out of here.